This is the best basketball game on the Neo Geo. In fact, it's the only basketball game on the Neo Geo. Street Hoop, or Street Slam, or Dunk Dream is a solid 3-on-3 basketball game, and it plays kind of like a prototype of NBA Street. Alright, there's 3 different names for this game. I'll call it Street Hoop for this video since I've got the emulator stuck to the European region. It's pretty much the same game regardless of region. The only thing that changes is the name and I guess the location of the teams. But what's the story behind this game? Okay, this is what the home console version of the Neo Geo looked like. As you can tell from the controller alone, the idea was to literally bring the arcade experience home. The Neo Geo was originally released back in 1990 in 2 formats. There was the arcade system board called the MVS and this home video game console called the AES. Now, this was an impressive piece of equipment and it retailed at $650 when it was first released in North America in early 1991. Individual games cost $200 or more, something unheard of even today. Of course, the interesting thing is that the system was billed as a 24-bit system, which naturally must have caused parents to wonder how much a bit was actually worth. The selection of games for the system was also limited, something that really hurt the Neo Geo in the long run. But then again, you do have to admit that these ads are kind of persuasive. My understanding is that the home console version was originally intended to be for rental only. Even then, it must have been really pricey. I mean, why not just go to the arcade and play the game instead of paying $650 for the console? It's not like these games were complex RPGs or strategy games where you have to play it at home, after all. Anyway, Street Hoop, or Dunk Dream, or whatever you want to call it, came out in the arcades in December 1994. The game was made by Data East and is one of the rare Neo Geo games that wasn't made by SNK. This was almost 2 full years after the initial arcade release of NBA Jam. It was also over 6 months after the release of NBA Jam Tournament Edition. And it was over a year after the release of Konami's Run and Gun. Now keep that in mind when you look at these clips of gameplay. Does this look like a more advanced arcade game to you? I mean, I know the graphics aren't everything, but seriously, if you paid $650 for this system in like 1991, and then $200 for this game and when did it come out, like 1994, you would want something that would blow your mind, right? Street Hoop seems a little bit simplistic in comparison to other arcade games. The soundtrack is okay, I guess, but the announcing is pretty lame. And note that the players don't scale the way that they do in NBA Jam. I know that's a minor detail, but this really was a major feature of the NBA Jam arcade game. You would absolutely expect to see something like this in an arcade game that came out in late 1994. I mean, Run and Gun had scaling, right? Why couldn't this game have better graphics? The gameplay itself is really basic. It only uses 2 buttons, there's no turbo, and that can be a problem sometimes. Okay, to dunk, you go somewhere inside the key and you push shoot. If you just tap the shoot button, you can fake a shot. And as usual, the shoot button is the same as the block button. Your other option is to pass. That turns into a steal or a shove button when you're on defense. Now notice that there's no button to change players. That just sort of happens. And it's not like they didn't have extra buttons for that functionality. Now, it's not an awful game, but there were some really questionable design decisions. I mean, the system came with 4 buttons, so why only use 2? Anyway, the Super Shot feature is pretty cool. Your meter goes up when you make shots. Get it up all the way and you can do one of these Super Shots. or if you want to super dunk. It's basically the same thing as the Game Breaker system in the NBA Street series. In fact, a lot of the NBA Street series feels like a 3D version of Street Hoop.
Hey man, pick up the check.
But believe it or not, the gameplay in NBA Street is actually a lot better.
Boing boing.
And as sad as I am to say this, that also includes the Neo Geo CD version of this game. The Neo Geo CD came out in December 1994 in Japan and Europe, not long after Street Hoop was released. The US version was delayed, however. This announcement is from GamePro September 1995, but the system wasn't actually released until January 1996. Anyway, that same issue of GamePro featured this extensive article about the PlayStation, which of course came out in September 1995. Street Hoop on the Neo Geo CD is basically the same game as the original, except that the music sounds a little bit more clear. There's some bug that prevents a lot of the other sounds from playing. I don't know if that's an emulation issue or a problem with the original game. Anyway, I hate to say this, but this game is really underwhelming. Now, the PlayStation version of NBA Jam Tournament Edition is horrible. I mean, don't play it. But it looks a lot better than the CD version of Street Hoop. Now, it does get a little bit more complicated than just that. So Data East, the company that made this game, created an arcade follow-up to Street Hoop in 1995. That means that this game came out before the Neo Geo CD version of the original Street Hoop was released in North America. Yeah, it's a little bit confusing. This game was known as Dunk Dream 95 in Japan. The international version was called Hoops, but most gamers call it Hoops 96. It's basically the same game, except you can now change your player. The graphics are also clearly improved. The problem though is that this game is over way too fast. So in Street Hoop you play two halves. If you're behind before the second half starts, you have to put in an extra coin. In Hoops 96, however, you only get one half, which makes this game feel way too short. Now, there are some cool things like super defensive moves to stop super shots. This is similar to the Game Breaker counter system of NBA Street. The soundtrack, however, still really feels behind the times. And once again, there's no sprite scaling. It looks pretty old in comparison to NBA Hang Time, which also came out in 1996. And Hoops 96 died really quietly. It only got a home console release in the 2010s in retro compilations. Overall, it was kind of a failed project, but why didn't it work? Well, the sprites are pretty generic for one thing. In the original game, everybody looks the same. Hoops 96 improved on this a little bit, but it's still pretty lame. The animations are nice, I suppose. But Run and Gun had far better dunk animations. The biggest problem, though, was almost certainly the cost of the system itself. There was no home market for the Neo Geo unless you were really rich. And even if you were rich, you would probably rather spend that money on Samurai Showdown than on this game. By the time the Neo Geo CD came out in North America, the original was already obsolete. And Hoops 96 just didn't get any attention when it came out. It's not a bad concept, sure, and like I said, the concept did live on in the NBA Street series, but unfortunately these two games are pretty lame NBA Jam clones overall. There are a few nice things about these games, sure, but the overall presentation really leaves a lot to be desired.